When you think back on all the phones you've had in your pocket the past 10 years, they've been some iteration of a rectangle. Ever since physical keyboards essentially went away on smartphones, the design hasn't changed. But starting now, that rectangle is changing, it's morphing, and it's folding. And I don't think the smartphone landscape is ever going to be the same. I was trying to describe to my wife, who doesn't follow technology very closely, what the Galaxy Fold looks like. And the best analogy I can come up with was, it's like a book. Got the cover on the outside, you open it up, and there's your content. And it's pretty much the same thing here. You have to change a little bit the way you use a smartphone, but the looks of it are much more impressive than I thought they were going to be. When this was announced, now almost 2 months ago, I admittedly didn't have the highest expectations for it. It seemed a little bit gimmicky, and it looked a little bit silly, but now I've actually got one in my hands. The look is growing on me, and it feels like a premium device. You'd expect for the $2,000 price point. I really like the way the Fold looks. So when the Fold got announced, I, like you, probably had a ton of questions. One of the chief among them, though, was the hinge. It looks big in video and pictures, but how's it gonna perform? So when you open the phone up, it's actually really neat. The hinge completely disappears. You get kind of a satisfying click, and you don't get, floppy hinge syndrome. When the phone is open, it's locked in that position. It's not going to sort of accidentally fold. Samsung did a really nice job engineering that hinge. I also kind of had the reverse question too. When it's closed, is it gonna sort of accidentally open up in my pocket, or maybe open a little bit and turn the screen on and kill the battery? When this thing is closed, you get an equally satisfying little clicky noise to let you know that this is closed and it's not going to open. In fact, you gotta put some effort to actually open the phone up. So the other question I had was, a 4.6-inch screen a couple years ago, would have seemed like a normal size screen, but it's small by today's standards. And you've got a very tall sort of amount of real estate here. So the 4.6-inch screen's got gigantic bezels on the top and bottom. If you could look at anything, we could say, okay, I know what changes are gonna come for Gen 2. That would probably be the first thing that I would call out. But having said that, it's still very usable, and it's still a 4.6-inch screen, even if the aspect ratio might be a little bit weird. And you can use it closed like you would use any Samsung phone with One UI. There's no sort of degraded experience. It's not like a half phone with the screen closed. You can do anything you want. And when you talk about the Galaxy Fold, the biggest question, and maybe the elephant in the room, was the inside screen itself. Is there going to be a crease, and how's that crease going to sort of impact what you're doing? So the crease is here, and it's definitely visible. You can see it, and you can feel it even when you run your finger across it. I don't mind it. I'm trying to give it some perspective. It's a foldable display. There's gotta be some sort of give here. You can't have a glass screen that can bend. It's sort of a plasticky polymer blend on top of it. I don't mind it. Assuming it's not gonna get worse over time, it's pretty good as is, but it is definitely there, but I don't think it degrades at all from using the Galaxy Fold. So I think one of the biggest compliments that I can give the two screens on the Fold is that they look like Samsung screens. And I've said it for several generations of Samsung devices. They make the best screens in the market. And these two displays are no exception. The outer screen, it looks beautiful. When you open it up, you're still getting that OLED technology, and it looks really good. And so you might think 7.3 inches is gonna be a bit weird to hold because of the almost 4:3 aspect ratio. It actually sits really nicely in one hand. It lends itself even better for when you want to use things with two hands. So typing is really natural. And because the screen is kind of split, you're almost getting like two Galaxy S10 real estate, one on each side, that you can work with. So you got a ton of space here. Alright, so all of that stuff is fine. The screens look good, the hardware feels good. The software experience, Samsung's got a lot riding on this not being a degraded or weirdly strange software experience. If you've used Samsung One UI recently, this is actually going to feel very familiar. So it's got something called app continuity, and I thought that was something that Samsung did themselves, but it turns out they worked very closely with Google. It's actually baked into Android Pie, so what you're doing on one screen will show up on the other screen when you open it up. And most apps are supported, and developers have access to sort of make all of their apps be supported. So I've had no lag issues at all, and I've had 8 apps open at one time on this thing, and everything works. It is a multitasking powerhouse. And the fact you can have one device that can do multiple things in one device that can take over multiple form factors is really awesome. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, but the most interesting use case, I think, is with the cameras. So this camera suite is pretty much taken exactly from the Galaxy S10 Plus. When you open this thing up and you use this giant 7.3-inch screen as a viewfinder, it is incredible. Selfies look terrifying. I'm not used to seeing myself on that giant of a screen, but using this as a viewfinder, being able to see that wide angle lens is a really, really unique experience. So if you take a lot of pictures and you want a viewfinder, you're not gonna look as ridiculous as holding a giant tablet up, taking a photo. This is a really cool way to do it. So if you couldn't tell, on a whole, I really like the Galaxy Fold. In fact, I'm surprised by how much I like the Galaxy Fold. But it's not perfect, and it's certainly a Gen 1 device. There's a huge notch in the upper right-hand corner. You can kind of hide it in software, but it is there. I don't mind that the fingerprint reader is built into the side. What is weird though, it's not built into the power button, it's built into the Bixby button. So anytime you push that in, you're going to launch Bixby. You can remap it, or maybe a double tap will open Bixby, but it is not the power button. That's located right above fingerprint reader. That seems a little bit strange to me. There's a lot of open real estate, obviously, on the front screen. I talked about that. Factoring in those few things, at least initially, there aren't that many things that I don't like about the Galaxy Fold. Samsung did a really nice job here. When the first Note came out, it seemed ridiculous. And out of every phone that I've ever tested in my time reviewing them, I've never had more people stop me in public than when I was using the very first Galaxy Note. It was so jarring and so different from what the mobile status quo was that people just didn't know what to think of it. It seems silly, it seems ridiculous, and you can't figure out why somebody would want that or want to spend the money for it. But retrospectively, you look back on 5-10 years from now, I think we'll look back on the Fold as the same way as the Note. How could we imagine our lives without foldable screens? How could we unfold into a tablet? How could we change our screens to replace the laptops? The Fold is a really big paradigm shift for how we use phones, and I think more importantly, what our phones are capable of doing. And I give Samsung a ton of credit for that. So in my 10+ years of covering technology, I haven't seen that many firsts. I've had a chance to be a part of a few momentous tech paradigm changes, but I feel like the Galaxy Fold is one of those. It's really the first foldable phone that's coming out to the mass market. It's one of the first devices that's doing something new. It's changing literally, and I guess figuratively, the shape of smartphones, and I'm excited for it. The Galaxy Fold Gen 1 might not be for everybody. It's very expensive with its own quirks. If you look at what it represents and how it's going to change the industry in 5, 6, 7 years, I think we'll look back at the Fold's launch as a start of something new.